almost October and I have a story to tell you. So yesterday when I was setting up this tombstone, a bunch of youths cycled past my house and one of the youths yelled in awe, "What the Sigma? They're not just on TikTok, they're outside in the real world." And then I heard a little girl say, "This house always goes off on Halloween," and I was extremely proud of myself. And that brings us to today's video, which is all about how I made this Frankenstein inspired tombstone for my front yard Halloween display. I'm doing a cemetery this year. We're building a haunted cemetery. And I think I'm going to film setting that up tomorrow. So I started off by tracing out the shape that I wanted on this XPS foam that I got from Bunnings. This was pretty expensive. It was about $20. I grabbed 2 boards because I have a plan of what I might want to do with the next board. And then I started kind of tracing out the design that I wanted. I knew that I wanted a face in this design, and I knew that I wanted lightning bolts in this design. And I knew that I wanted those lightning bolts to light up. So I traced out a rough idea of the face and the insignia, the inscription, the stuff they write on tombstones. I don't hang out in too many graveyards, or I don't know any funeral people, so I don't know what it's called. Once I had a rough idea of how I wanted my tombstone to look sketched out, I decided to make the face out of polymer clay. And this basically meant just looking at a lot of references of Boris Karloff's Frankenstein, because that was my main inspiration. And then I also had a little bit of inspiration, which was from an episode of The Simpsons Haunted Treehouse of Horror, Treehouse of Terror? I can't remember what it's called, but they do a Halloween episode like every year, and it's always really fun. And there's one where Homer is basically turned into Frankenstein and he has like a glass dome and an open brain. Making the face was pretty much just a combination of creating a whole bunch of polymer clay sausages in the rough shape that I wanted and the rough placement I wanted to get some kind of Boris Karloff Frankenstein likeness, and then smoothing that out and adding a lot of wrinkles and details so that he looked all decrepit and old and monstery. I decided to put that aside for a couple days so I could double check that it was how I wanted it to look, and then I grabbed my soldering iron and my hot wire cutter and I started carving out what I wanted in my tombstone. I used the same soldering iron for pretty much this entire project, just angling it in different ways. I used it to create little dots here on the inscription. I kind of used it like a pencil and just drew with it to create the lightning bolts. And you may notice that the inscription that I chose was Adam 1818, and that is because in the Frankenstein book, the monster often refers to himself as Adam or your Adam when he's writing to his creator, and 1818 is a typo because I googled what year Frankenstein was published and I thought it said 1818, but it turned out I just wasn't wearing glasses and it said 1816, so fun. In my cinematic universe, he died 2 years after his creation, and I haven't read the book since I was 18, so I don't actually remember. and I tried to sharply outline all of my things like letters, clouds, lightning, etc. To smooth out my polymer clay sculpture, I like to use turpentine. You can use water-based or mineral-based. I have found that it works a whole lot better than rubbing alcohol, which is what I used to use, because rubbing alcohol tends to make the clay a little bit too dry. I used expanding foam to stick the foam board to another piece of foam board for the base. This worked really well. I also used this later on to stick the polymer clay face to the tombstone, and again, it works pretty amazingly. Expanding foam is a really great Halloween and Christmas decoration product. Now I'm fitting the face to the tombstone. I basically filled the hollow cavity at the back of the face with the expanding foam and then just pressed it on. And my plan was to sit there for like an hour and just hold it. And then my partner was like, that's ridiculous, I'm gonna find you something to sit it down on. And he found me a plastic tub that I could lay it down on. I went around the edges of the sculpt with foam clay, which is a medium that a lot of cosplayers and DIYers use. It's pretty handy. It's not the best in terms of getting detail when you sculpt. You can go in afterwards with Dremels and knives and things like that to create a better sculpt, but here I was just kind of putting in a rough brain shape and thought that it didn't really need to be anything particularly special. But it really helped to close up the gaps and melded in really well with all of the detail that was already there. Next, I found this powder spackle at Bunnings. I thought it was a normal drywall joint compound when I bought it, but it was not. It was this powder stuff, which was kind of handy because I could make it as thin or thick as I liked, similar to using something like plaster, and in using that I could get really deep into the crevices that I needed to get into. I just kind of pasted this all over the tombstone just to give a little bit more texture, so that when I painted it, it would look a little bit more rough and like stone. This also helps a little bit with waterproofing, which is great. And I made sure to get it, of course, all over the face into all of the crevices there. You'll notice that I left an outline on the lightning bolts because I'm going to be threading lights into those deep crevices and trying to fill the lightning bolts up to the top with hot glue. Initially I was going to use resin, and you could totally use resin, but I actually found that because the crevices were so small, I only needed hot glue. So I started with a layer of black acrylic paint over everything, making sure again to get into all of those deep cracks and crevices. This was pretty difficult in the lightning patches, and I do think spray paint would be way easier here. I then went in with a layer of grey stone spray paint, and that really helped to fix up any of the spots that I had missed, as well as give everything kind of that more stone looking feel. He was looking pretty good, but I felt that he needed some weathering, so I went back in with the black acrylic paint, and I watered it down pretty heavily, even at some points putting it into a spray bottle with some water in it so that I could just spray it across and wait for it to dry overnight and all the water to evaporate and kind of leave dark spots in all of the lowest points where it would sink. When I felt like I had finally put enough black on for the base coat, I went in with a dry brush and some white acrylic paint just over the top of everything, and then back in with that black water and paint mixture to dirty it up again. This just gives it a little bit of a more stony effect, and I even dabbed some of that off with some tissue. I made sure to put black back in any places that I felt it needed it. And then it was time for lights. Now, I made a mistake with my lights. So I used solar powered fairy lights, which they have worked great for this project. But if you wanted to make this look really, really, really cool, if you can find that it's like an LED flex tube, and it is what people use to make modern neon signs for like weddings and birthdays and things like that, because it's not neon and it's not difficult to use. You can just, it's called something like neon flex tube, but if you can find a solar powered version of that, then I think that that would look so much better in these lightning bolts. But what I did, because I couldn't find a solar powered version of that, was I just layered up my fairy lights as much as I could, as much as would fit, and just kept twisting them over one another, making sure obviously not to break the connection. And then I hot glued them in place. And the hot glue, as I said before, was definitely enough to fill everything up. And I didn't actually need to pour the resin in like I thought I would originally. I used 2 full strings of solar powered fairy lights for this project, one for each lightning bolt. And then I wanted his eyes to look a little bit creepier, so I drilled right through them and added a wire all the way through to kind of gouge out a little bit of foam so that I could bring some more lights to the forefront of his eyes and create a really eerie glowing effect. When I was finished with that, I dabbed in a little bit more black paint to help everything meld together and create a little less uniformity in the lightning bolts. that is how I created my light up monsters tomb Frankenstein tombstone. I don't know what to call it. I also don't know what to call this video because none of the SEO tools I use to help me with YouTube titling seem to have an idea. I'm making a haunted cemetery? I don't know. Thank you for watching. My name is Ellen Bourne, and if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. I'd love to get monetized by the end of the year, and I think I can do it. We just gotta hit 1,000 subscribers.